The cameras had just cut. A producer called for water. The room relaxed but only slightly. Melania Trump leaned in. It was subtle, not dramatic, just a tilt of the head, enough to close the space between her and Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett by a few inches. Her voice was low, accent unmistakable. "You should be careful who you call out," she said softly. Some of us never forget. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that her mic was still live. The Net studio in Albany had been quiet all morning, but when Melania Trump entered, something changed. No gasp, no chatter, just stillness. Even the floor crew straightened their backs. She wore a navy coat dress, cream heels, and a face unreadable. It was her first panel appearance in over a year. That alone was news. But what had everyone tuning in wasn't her. It was who sat 3 seats down. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, the firebrand from Texas. Jasmine didn't play it safe. Known for her precision and boldness, she had spent the last year calling out what she called performance politics leaders who smiled for the camera and said nothing behind closed doors. She never named names, but everyone knew some of her recent jabs were aimed at the East Wing. The panel was billed as a discussion on political civility. 4 guests, 1 moderator, no studio audience, just glass desks, deep gray walls, and millions watching from home. The opening questions were tame. The moderator, veteran anchor Steve Barkley, asked, "What does civility even mean anymore?" Melania's responses were brief, polished. "Real strength," she said, "is not loud." Jasmine tilted her head, then replied, "Sometimes noise is the only thing people hear after being ignored for too long." A small laugh, just enough. The dynamic was set. Melania kept her answers measured. Jasmine moved quick, sharp. They never interrupted. They didn't need to. The tension built quietly, the way humidity builds before a storm. Then came the question, has the White House done enough to tone down political heat? Melania replied, "I can only be responsible for my own words, not how others react." Jasmine didn't miss a beat. Silence is a reaction too. Still no sparks, just that slow, deliberate boil. And then, a technical detail changed everything. A green light on the control board turned yellow. Mics were still hot. The moderator closed the segment. "We'll take a quick break. Stay with us." The cameras pulled back. The broadcast cut to black. The crew stepped in. Bottles of water, adjusted earpieces, but the air was different and charged. Melania leaned in. "You should be careful who you call out," she whispered. "Some of us never forget." Jasmine blinked once. Slowly, she turned her head just slightly and answered, "Calm, low? That's supposed to scare me." Melania offered a small smile. Neutral, unreadable. The exchange lasted maybe 10 seconds, but it was caught perfectly by a backup audio feed being monitored by Angela Russo, a junior night shift editor working in a back corner editing bay. Angela rewound, played it again, sat still. Technically, she wasn't supposed to be monitoring off-air feeds, but lately, with high-profile guests, some producers quietly started recording everything, just in case. Angela clipped the audio, just under 20 seconds. She sent it to a friend. Within 40 minutes, that friend tweeted it. A shaky phone recording of the editing screen. "You should be careful who you call out." The internet detonated. First Twitter, then TikTok, then conservative forums, Instagram memes, liberal podcasts. The hashtag #HotMic Melania trended within the hour. So did #Careful Jasmine. The clip hit 8 million views by midnight. The coverage exploded. CNN played the clip 3 times in 1 hour. Fox News framed it as Melania defending her dignity. MSNBC brought in linguists to analyze the whisper. It wasn't just what was said, it was the way it was said, and who it was said to. Jasmine didn't post a press release. No interview, just a single tweet. "Some people hide behind quiet voices. I don't." 10 words, no names, no hashtags, but it hit like a lightning bolt. By sunrise, it had been reposted by A-list celebrities and printed out by school teachers. A woman from Michigan commented, "My daughter taped this to her mirror." Inside Jasmine's team, the storm was real. Dion Shields, her press secretary, barely slept. The phone wouldn't stop. Some messages were hateful, others emotional. Many just said, "Thank you." But what really fueled the fire was Melania's silence. No statement, no clarification, just stillness. Some called it strategic, others called it guilt. In Arlington, Jasmine sat in her apartment with the TV on mute. Every channel played the same loop of Melania's whisper, her own response. She sipped cold coffee. Dion sat nearby, scanning headlines. "You're trending again," Dion said. "#2 in the country." "Just behind the NFL scandal." Jasmine laughed. "Dry. Guess I should thank her." Then her phone buzzed. A name from the past. Ruthie Miles. They'd interned together back in 2010. Ruthie's voice came through fast. "You need to be careful." "Nice to hear from you too." "I'm serious," Ruthie said. "They're already spinning it that you baited her." "I didn't even say anything." "You didn't have to." "That's what scares them." Later that night, Jasmine wrote a letter, not to Melania, not to the press, to her constituents. "I was elected to speak truth, not to whisper behind cameras. I will not change that because of power or position. If that's loud, then so be it." The post went viral again. But behind the scenes, people started digging. A reporter in Portland uncovered a detail that reshaped the narrative. Melania's team had requested she not be seated next to Rep. Crockett. It wasn't enforced, but it was requested. A quiet preference, but now, it spoke volumes. The story didn't start at the studio. It started a year earlier. Naples, Florida. A private charity fundraiser. No cameras, no media, just donors and a few rising political names. Jasmine had just entered Congress. She was there to build support for a healthcare bill. She hadn't planned to see Melania, but they met near the dessert bar. Melania offered a faint smile. "Congresswoman, I represent the district with one of the highest uninsured rates in the state," Jasmine said. "I'm hoping to gain support for more clinics." "That is your work?" "Yes, I believe in solving real problems." Melania tilted her head. "Some people smile, some people shout. It does not mean one is more sincere. But if you plan to build influence, maybe learn which tone the room prefers." Jasmine didn't reply. She walked away, but she never forgot. So when Melania whispered at the panel months later, it didn't feel spontaneous. It felt like the last line of a conversation Jasmine hadn't finished. And Jasmine, she wasn't done either. Because while everyone focused on the whisper, someone inside the network who confirmed what really happened. Angela Russo hadn't leaked the tape by accident. She'd seen too many stories buried, too many truths edited out. This time, she thought, the world deserved to hear what was said behind the cameras. And now, it had. The clip had become unavoidable. Whether you leaned left or right, whether you cared about politics or tried to ignore it by the next morning, you had either heard Melania's whisper or heard someone talking about it. You should be careful who you call out. Some of us never forget. News programs played it like a pop song on repeat. Analysts dissected the rhythm, the pacing, the meaning behind the words. On The View, one host called it the veiled threat. Another defended it as just a reminder to stay respectful. But the people who understood the deeper code are those who'd grown up reading between the lines as they heard something else. It wasn't just a whisper. It was a message. You don't belong here. Jasmine Crockett knew that tone. The elegant condescension, the restrained smirk. It wasn't new. What was new was that now, the whole country had heard it too. Her staff had turned their small congressional office into a command center. Fold-out tables, coffee cups, wall-mounted flat screens showing endless media loops. Dion Shields barely left her chair. Local newspapers were asking for interviews. Cable hosts were offering primetime slots. But Jasmine refused to speak again. Not yet. She'd already said enough. Instead, she focused on the work, the very thing her critics claimed she abandoned for the spotlight. Her team drafted amendments, responded to constituent cases. They even hosted a virtual town hall. No mention of the Mick moment, no nod to the media circus. But even as she tried to move forward, the moment shadowed everything. And then, the next leak hit. It came from inside it. Someone had quietly forwarded internal communications to a national outlet. Emails showing Melania Trump's team requesting her seat not be adjacent to Jasmine's. The language was clean, non-confrontational. But the message was unmistakable: avoid proximity if possible. That added fuel to the fire. Online, the narrative deepened. Was Melania trying to avoid confrontation or orchestrate it? Suddenly, producers and insiders began whispering, not just about the Mick, but about the event itself. About the weeks leading up to the taping, one junior booking agent anonymously told Politico, "We were warned there might be tension, but we didn't expect that." And beneath the surface, another thread was quietly being pulled. Angela Rushowa, the assistant editor who leaked the clip, hadn't spoken publicly, but she'd been asked to meet with HR twice. The second meeting didn't feel like a check-in, it felt like an interrogation. "Did anyone ask you to leak it?" Number. "Did you have prior contact with any political staffers?" Number. She knew what they were doing, trying to build a case, trying to make her the story. By the following week, Angela was suspended without pay, pending internal review, but that only made things worse for the network. News leaked again, up this time from a sympathetic engineer who shared a screenshot of Angela's suspension notice. The caption read, "She told the truth, they punished her for it." Angela became a hero in some corners of the internet, a traitor in others, but the media could no longer ignore her name, and neither could Jasmine. One morning, after reviewing press briefings, Jasmine quietly asked Dion, "What's the girl's name?" "The one who found the clip." Dion flipped through a sheet. "Angela Russo." Jasmine nodded, then picked up her pen and wrote a note. It was brief, direct, no handlers, no team involvement. Later that day, Angela received a handwritten letter with a congressional seal. It read, "Greater than Angela, you didn't shout, you didn't spin, you just let people hear what was already there. That takes clarity, that takes courage. Thank you." Jasmine. Angela cried when she read it, not because of the recognition, but because she realized someone had listened. Meanwhile, the White House remained quiet. Melania's office issued no clarification, no apology. Rumors swirled that internal advisors were urging her to address the moment head-on, but she refused. Some insiders said she was furious, others claimed she didn't care. The silence left room for speculation, and where speculation grows, so do secrets. It was Riley Sharp, the mid-level executive from Meta, who finally broke that silence from the inside. After weeks of internal tension, he reached out to a friend at a major network. Off the record, he didn't leak more footage. He didn't expose any scandal. He just said one thing: greater than this wasn't the first time she tried to manage who sat next to her. It's a pattern. That one quote made it onto a Sunday op-ed. And that's when the tide began to turn. Because it wasn't just about one whisper anymore. It was about patterns. Who gets placed where, who gets heard, who gets warned to be careful, and who's expected to stay quiet. For Jasmine, it had always been about the room and the power behind the pleasantries, the danger behind the civility. She remembered something her grandmother once told her when she was a teenager: "Some people don't need to slam the door to lock you out." She had felt that her whole life, and now, millions of people were feeling it with her. That's why when she returned to Washington 2 weeks later, she didn't avoid the press. She stood outside the Capitol, microphone in front of her, wind tugging at her blazer, and she said, "Greater than this story was never about a whisper. It's about who gets to speak freely, and who gets warned not to. I didn't come here to be careful. I came here to be clear." Then she stepped away. No questions, no spin, just clarity. The clip aired on every network. Melania Trump still didn't respond, but inside a Manhattan penthouse, one of her former advisors quietly made a call to a reporter and said something cryptic. "Greater than, you're asking the wrong question. Don't ask why Melania said what she said, ask who she said it for." And somewhere in the shadows of the media machine, a bigger story was beginning to form. Because Jasmine Crockett had become a symbol, and Melania Trump, she had become a mirror. And America, aloud, divided, watching, was forced to confront what it really meant to be careful. By week 3, the media frenzy hadn't faded up, it had evolved. What started as a whisper had become a fractured line, splitting not only pundits and politicians but the institutions that hosted them, and faced pressure from both donors and watchdog groups. Staff morale was fractured. Half the newsroom wore Angela Russo's name on duct tape across their coffee mugs. The other half avoided her name altogether, treating it like radioactive fallout. Angela's suspension still hadn't been lifted. Jasmine Crockett, meanwhile, had returned to Congress with a quieter presence but sharper intent. She declined the morning shows, ignored cable network offers. Instead, she spent her time chairing subcommittees, pushing amendments through markup, and building new coalitions behind closed doors. But silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. She knew how the media cycle worked: outrage, reaction, pivot, forget. But she also knew something had changed this time. The moment hadn't faded. It kept echoing, not just because of the clip, but because of how Melania still hadn't said a word, not a sentence, not a tweet, not a whisper since the whisper. That vacuum spoke louder than anything. And in DC, silence is rarely accidental. Behind the scenes, Jasmine's team had started digging. Dion Shields, fueled by a sense that something deeper was beneath the mic moment, started mapping connections, production emails, donor events, cross-checked guest lists. What she found wasn't proof of conspiracy, but it was proximity. Too many coincidences stacked on top of one another. The Naples fundraiser, hosted by a major political donor who had ties not only to Melania's philanthropic efforts but also to a powerful consulting firm based out of Atlanta. That same firm had recently begun working with the conservative coalition targeting high-volume disruptors in Congress, a euphemism Dion found in an internal pitch deck. Jasmine's name was on slide 6. It wasn't hard evidence, but it was a signal. Someone, somewhere, saw Jasmine as a threat, and Melania, whether knowingly or not, had become their vassal. But the other side was moving too. In a quiet office inside a Georgetown brownstone, a meeting was taking place between two men who hadn't spoken in years. Grayson Maddox, a conservative media strategist known for his surgical messaging, and Noah Levant, a former communications aide to the Trump White House who had recently distanced himself from the spotlight. Grayson poured the coffee. Noah didn't touch it. "You want my read?" Noah said. "She said it on purpose." "You think she meant to get caught?" "Number." "But she wanted that moment, whether the mic caught it or not." Grayson narrowed his eyes. "Then why say it at all?" "Because she's not stupid," Noah replied. "She knows the walls are always listening now." That whisper was a flag, not to Jasmine, to the people who fund her next step. "You mean the campaign?" Noah looked up. "I mean whatever comes after the First Lady." Grayson leaned back, slowly. "You think she's testing the waters?" "I think someone's testing them for her." Noah opened a folder. Inside was a list of names, most crossed out. At the bottom, one name remained circled: Crockett. She wasn't the target, she was the match. Back in Arlington, Jasmine wasn't thinking about matches or whispers anymore. She was thinking about the next vote. A community health bill she'd been fighting for was finally coming to the floor. It had bipartisan backing, but last-minute noise was starting to stir. Emails from advocacy groups, right-wing influencers questioning her temperament, recycled clips of past speeches taken out of context. It wasn't coincidence, it was a tactic. Stir doubt, slow momentum, make the face of the bill look unsteady. Her chief of staff, Thomas Gaines, placed the latest polling data on her desk. "You're still rising," he said. "I'm still being watched," she replied. That night, Jasmine received an email from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read, "She wasn't the only one who was mic'd." Inside was a single sentence: "Greater than, you're not the only one they tried to warn." Attached was a file, audio. She played it. A different panel, different city, different voice. Melania again. This time the target was Rep. Rena Mendoza, a rising Latina progressive from Nevada. The voice was low but clear. "Greater than power isn't always loud. Rena, you may want to learn that before it embarrasses you." The clip was old, a year, maybe more. It had never aired. Jasmine sat still. They weren't just watching her, they were trying to prune a generation of women like her: sharp, unapologetic, uncontained. The leak was anonymous, but the intention was clear. They weren't dealing with one outburst, they were facing a pattern. Jasmine sent it to Dion, then shut her laptop and stood by the window. Outside, streetlights blinked. The city felt quiet again, but her mind was louder than ever. She had been warned. Now she was warning back.